I'm James Reeman, retired Air National Guard Lieutenant Colonel, and my aviation background is a mixture of civilian, military, and airline. My understanding is your guys' class is a corporate and business aviation course, and I can speak to that a little bit as well. But I'll give you a little bit of my background so you know kind of where I'm coming from and some of the angles I might be able to answer. But I had a discovery flight in the high school age range, and the lifestyle of a commercial pilot appealed to me. So I went to a Part 141 college in Florida and did my flight training while I was in college, worked through my ratings. And then while I was there, I discovered the Air National Guard and started rushing guard units and was able to get hired by a guard unit upon completion from college. So I had a degree, I had some flying time, and I went into the Air National Guard, got commissioned, and spent 25 years flying fighters in the Guard, mostly on a part-time basis, while I concurrently worked for an airline. Toward the end of my Guard career, I did some non-flying stuff in command with Space Force and some other things. But the whole time I was there, I was also flying for Delta Airlines. I'm in my 29th year, if that seems possible, with Delta. So I have a vast amount of experience, military and airline. I want two camps. What do you think is more important in corporate and business aviation? That is your flying skills or your ability to solve problems. So we'll go flying skills first. Hands up, flying skills. Flying skills, show of hands. All right, good. And then ability to solve problems, show of hands. All right. It's probably ability to solve problems. In the corporate and business aviation world, you are the system. I will tell you, in the military and at the airline, there is so much of the system that supports you. And when it comes to flight planning, mission planning, the target, all that kind of stuff, I'll talk military first. We don't pick the targets, and whether it's in Iran today or Iraq years ago, that's all picked for you. The tactics and techniques we use are on the individual flight leads, but there's a huge system that supports you. At the airline, I will tell you, if and when you guys end up, you show up, the flight planning's done, the weather, the fuel, you definitely look over that stuff and have the opportunity as a captain to go, hey, I'd like a little more gas, or maybe, a little bit different routing due to weather. But for the most part, you have a system that supports you. In the corporate and business aviation world, you might show up and the boss or the premium passenger decided on a different destination, the catering's wrong, and it's all on you. You're the caterer, you're the flight attendant, you're the captain, you're the decision maker. And so you are the one that actually goes in and solve the problems. And I've got a buddy of mine who just retired from the airlines because you have to do that at 65. And now he's flying corporate and he loves it because he said, man, I'm back in the driver's seat where I get to do all of the mission planning, all of the problem solving, all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to start out, because your guys' class is a little bit of a corporate and business aviation class, with just a little bit of that perspective that if you love routine and having a plan and predictability, I'll tell you the airlines is great. There's still some curveballs there. But if you like the flexibility and the autonomy of kind of going out there on your own and having to solve problems, corporate and business aviation is a really kind of unique spot where that still happens. So there's that. What qualities or experiences made you competitive for both Air National Guard and airline hiring? All right. I like to answer this question, and that's going to work great if you just type the questions in as they come up. So I have a little 3-5-3 format. And I'm going to give, so if you're taking notes, write down these first three things. The first three are vision, passion, and discipline. Vision, and whether it be military or airline, not only do you have to have decent eyes to fly, or at least correctable to 2020 now these days, thanks to advances. Back in the day, that was a little narrower gate than it used to be. Vision is this idea that you've got a target, you've got a goal. I'm a huge fan of written goals, and they're going to be able to assess this in your interview. I interviewed a lot of applicants that got hired into the Air National Guard, and I always used to ask them, what's your plan? What's your plan if you get hired here? What's your plan if you don't get hired here? How badly do you want this? Do you have targets? Do you have goals? How long, is this something that you just decided a couple of weeks ago? Or is this something that you've been working on and strategizing for a long period of time, and what steps have you taken to do that? So vision is that whole goal setting structure. I have a plan for my future. Airlines are going to want to hear the same thing, that it's something that you've been working towards. Passion is this idea that you're not half-hearted about it. I talked about in corporate flying that problem solving is a big part of it. By the time you get to an interview, and whether that's with a guard unit, an airline, Part 135 or whatever, they're going to make certain assumptions about your flying skills based on your experience. What they want to see is how well are you going to represent the brand? And I'm going to talk about that brand. When it comes to an airline, at the major airlines, each one of them, they're super obsessed right now with how they look on social media, how they look to their premium passengers. Southwest used to have this little niche where, they didn't really care about premium passengers. Now, all of a sudden, everybody does, because that's where the big money is. So how much passion do you have for not only what you do, but the passion you're going to be able to have to represent that brand? In the Air National Guard, in the military, I would tell you, when we hire someone, they're going to be in that guard unit for 20 years. So we want to make sure they're passionate about that guard unit, the history, the mission, that state, the locale. Guard units are a state militia in addition to being a federal force. And so how well does someone understand that? How much passion do they have about that? Then the third one is discipline. And discipline for me is being willing to do the hard things that your competitors are not willing to do. And that might mean studying, getting up earlier, staying later, doing the preparation that it takes, taking kind of that bullshit job, at the FBO or whatever, to understand the airplanes better, to become a part of what you're going to do. And then discipline for me is also, we're going to kind of merge into the next five, is having protocols where, God, I'm trying to find a better adjective, but where you're not lazy, and it's okay to be lazy every once in a while, but that's probably my least favorite adjective, right? When I'm looking to hire someone. And so let's transition now from vision, passion, discipline to the next five. And these are the things I think you need to put into practice. And they're all P's conveniently. So protocols, number one; practice, number two; physical fitness, number three. It's a P word, but sounds like an F. People, number four; and then pressure. So protocols, do you have a disciplined routine in the morning on how you take care of yourself, how you prep yourself, not only for flying, but for life? And that might mean your nutrition, your meditation, your family life, your spiritual life. Are you disciplined in your protocols? Because aviation, regardless of whether you go military, airline, or corporate, requires a ton of disciplined protocols, checklists, checking the weather, adherence to procedures. And so if you're not good with procedures and protocols, then aviation, at least on the operator side, is probably not going to be for you. The second one is practice. And practice is, I want you to be a master of your craft. So I love the young lady right behind you, Chad. I might have picked on her a little bit because she raised her hand for flying skills. That is really important. And you need to be good at flying. And the way you get good at flying is through studying and through practice and execution, but continuing to do that. There's tons of free resources through the FAA's manuals, or anytime, you can go on YouTube and there's just an unlimited source of how can I get smarter? How can I get better? How can I be a master of my craft? So number two is practice. Number three is physical fitness. Chad met me through my Instagram channel. I do some cheesy fitness stuff on there just because I think it's really important. Let me assess the room a little bit, Chad. Do you have anybody super out of shape in there? I don't want to offend anyone. So this was going to be one of my hooks at one point. Is like, can you trust an out of shape pilot? Super controversial, right? But if you don't have the discipline to take care of yourself, how can I trust you to have the discipline to study, prepare, assess the weather, follow the checklist, do all that kind of stuff? And so I think physical fitness is a big part of it. The other reason it is, we talked about the different types of aviation. In the military, when you're deployed, flying night missions, backside of the clock, all that kind of stuff, if you're not physically fit, you're going to be fatigued and make mistakes, right? Airline schedules have their moments, and you always have the opportunity to go, hey, man, I don't feel safe. I'm fatigued. But at the same time, you're going to be on the edge of that sometimes, where your physical fitness, your ability to manage your rest, your nutrition, your hydration, gone are the days where, the standard pilot meal is a Coke and a candy bar. and, party until there's still some social opportunities, don't get me wrong, but managing that so that you're physically prepared to fly the airplane is important. And corporate, even more so. In corporate, I told you there's times where you might be at an outstation and the plan changes. The CEO or the high end client goes, "Hey, you need to do that." And so you're going to have to manage your fatigue, your rest, and the more fit you are and the better you take care of yourself, the better you're going to be able to do that. So the next thing the fourth P is people. Kind of what Chad and I have done a little bit and what you guys are doing today. Networking is super important. In aviation, you're very blessed to be a part of a culture where there's a camaraderie and a community that wants to help. It's kind of crazy. There's almost not a single pilot you could go to and like, "Hey, do you have some time where you could share with me some of your lessons learned?" And people are very generous with that, to the point if you're hanging out at the airport, people go, "Hey, if I have an empty right seat, man, you can jump in it," and maybe not even log SIC, but at least get that experience of more time with your rear end up defying gravity, builds your experience and helps you learn more and more. So embrace the people part. Even if you're not outgoing, you better figure out how to network, because I will tell you, on the corporate and business side, your resume has two very distinct parts: your flying experience, but also the reputation that you create for yourself and the network you build. I can't tell you the number of young people that got hired out of experience because they networked and they knew somebody who knew somebody else who referred them. And it's a little less likely at the airlines because they've got some really hard numbers. But in the corporate world, you're going to create a lot of opportunities through people and becoming the part of that network. Then number 5 is pressure. And by pressure, I mean put yourself in opportunities where you're making decisions under pressure. Anytime you're flying, it's pressure decisions, because flying's inherently dangerous. You're defying gravity. The margin for error, think about it, when you're driving, you could run into another car, but it's generally, not as fatal. Whereas flying, the mistakes you make can have fatal consequences. And that could be in a Cessna 152, an F-16, a Learjet, or a 767. So the more you fly, the more you're going to make decisions under pressure. But there's other ways to make decisions under pressure too. Volunteer for leadership opportunities. Put yourself out there in terms of finding ways where you're making decisions where those decisions carry weight. When I was hiring folks in the military, the more situations a person had put themselves in to have leadership failures as well as successes was really important to me, because they've developed the ability to make decisions under pressure. So a quick recap on the 5 Ps: protocols, practice, physical fitness, people, and pressure. All right, now I'm going to get into the last 3. So remember, this was a 3-5-3. The last 3, this is more of kind of the higher up on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's service, generosity, and gratitude. I alluded to the fact that being in aviation is great because you're part of a community and culture, but as you're on this journey, don't get so addicted to the grind that you forget to serve something greater than yourself. That might be your family. That might be something spiritual for you. It might be a charitable cause. But it's really easy in aviation to get so achievement oriented that you forget to kind of take care of yourself and to serve something greater than you. The generosity piece, which is my second part of this, comes along with it. There are going to be people that help you. So be sure that there's always someone right behind you trying to get there. Lend that helping hand, give them some time, give them your lessons learned, study groups, whatever it is. In the military circuit now, you'd be surprised when you go to pledge different units. And that's kind of how it works in the military to get into the Guard Reserve. You'll see some of the same faces. And all those are competitors in a way. The more helpful you are, the more you create that camaraderie and that kind of squadron mindset, the better it's going to serve you in the long run. So be generous with your time and your resources, because I think you'll find, hopefully, I love flying. It's been my profession now for almost 40 years, but the camaraderie, culture, friendships, fun times, and fun stories with the people that I've gotten to do that with is far more enjoyable for me than the airplanes themselves. And then the third one is gratitude. And just remember to take time to be thankful for the opportunity to get to do this. I always try to remind myself, even my worst days in aviation, there's a sucker in a cubicle married to a telephone and a computer somewhere. And if you're defying gravity and getting paid to do that, you're winning. And I don't care if it's banner towing, crop dusting, anything like that. It's really a unique privilege to get to fly for an income and for a living. All right. So I know that was a long-winded one, and you got some of my philosophy there, Chad. So thanks for enduring that. All right. I'm looking at the next question here. What were the biggest decision points that shaped you from military aviation to the airlines? Okay, that's a great question. For me, it was an easy transition because in the Air National Guard, 1/3 of the pilots stay full time. So at the Air National Guard and reserve components of the military flying, there are a small band of the folks there that fulfill the full-time roles, the scheduler, the commander, the operations officer, and they kind of hold the fort down 365, 24 hours a day. That's their job. It would be just like being active duty military. The rest of the folks are part-time or traditional, where you serve in the military part-time and you're expected to have a civilian job. So the airline career lends itself very well to being a military reservist. So for me, it was kind of easy because being an airline pilot was one of my original goals, and I was able to incorporate that into my military flying. I'll talk a little bit more from the perspective, though, of my friends that were active duty military that then went to the airlines, some after a 20-year career, and some prior. So those of you that don't have a framework in the military, 20 years is kind of a magic point because you get a vested military retirement. However, and some people go, hey, I'm going to serve 20 years in the military, love it, get my retirement, close that chapter. Now I'm a well-qualified participant to go compete for an airline or a corporate job, and that'll be my second chapter. However, some people earlier than 20 years decide to separate from the military and go to the airlines. And that, frankly, is usually driven by quality of life and family. Depending on which type of airplane you fly in the military, I had friends, from 2001 to 2010, we were in the Middle East a lot. And that's not easy on families. And some folks were just like, hey, look, we've had enough, and I've fulfilled my obligation to the military. I'm going to separate and go get an airline job, because although I'm gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, not for months at a time. And that would be a little bit easier for my family. So that's probably one of the main reasons why people transition. Being active duty military, you do relinquish some of that control to live in one place. As an airline pilot, you can kind of live one place and choose to commute if you want. But in the military, if you're active duty every 3 to 4 years, they're going to decide where you go, and you may or may not have input. So hopefully that answered that little bit transition from military to airline. All right, next question. Okay, what separates a good airline pilot from a great one in a major airline environment? This is a fun question. So I train and evaluate the new pilots at Delta. So I get to train brand new first officers. I also train and instruct first officers as they upgrade to captain. And then every 2 years, every one of our captains gets a check ride. So I get to be a part of that evaluation process for a major airline. And the big thing that I look for that differentiates good to great is that idea of passion for the culture. The baseline is you show up and fly a professional airplane. You follow the procedures, you do a good job, you handle any emergencies that come up, all that kind of stuff. The great captains show up a little early. They've got a fistful of wings and the very coveted trading cards, and you're engaging the gate agent, the flight attendants, the passengers. You're representing the brand, and you're doing so in a way that makes those customers want to come back and spend money on your airline. And as basic as that sounds, we have folks that kind of hide behind the cockpit door and just want to fly from A to B. And I always tell them they probably should have worked for FedEx, because the boxes don't care. We got a bunch of people back there that spent money, and it makes a huge difference to them to see you in your hat with your epaulets back there smiling, reassuring the nervous passengers, and representing the brand. So for me, the good to great, the good part is you do all the aviation stuff the way you should. The great part is you embrace that culture and you really get out there and interact with your fellow coworkers and your customers. All right. Next question. How do you manage fatigue and maintain performance on long duty days? All right. So I'll start broad and then I'll go a little bit more specific on how I do it. Managing rest is really important, right? And being physically fit is important. So you have to start there. Try to get good sleep. A lot of us use Aura rings. I use a Whoop strap. The fitness tracker in your Apple Watch is probably adequate, but I always say that is to kindergarten as Aura and Whoop are to like PhD. So we really dial into our circadian rhythm, all that kind of stuff. Folks didn't used to lean on that much. There's also certain protections. So definitely within the airline, if you're ever fatigued, you look your co-pilot in the eye, same thing in the military. And if you're not safe to operate that day, you simply don't operate. It's not worth doing that. But on the long duty days, the three things I really try to do, number one is rest well, but I hydrate like crazy. I drink a lot of water. That leads to more bathroom breaks, but staying well hydrated, I think, is really important. I use Element Packs, LMNT. Figure out a way to stay well hydrated. Being able to nap is important. I joke with my first officers that the key to being able to nap well is no conscience, but really there's some other things. I have a really disciplined routine that I go through. I've got this kind of Gucci gel sleep mask, earplugs that swimmers use, a little bit of tactical melatonin here and there after you figure out kind of what works for you, I think is important. But being able to nap, I fly primarily to Europe. So being on the backside of the clock, figuring out how to nap is really important. And then incorporating that exercise and other routines. I love dry sauna, cold plunge, stretch, a little bit of yoga here and there. I do a little bit of meditation. I work out every day. And those things really helped in terms of managing fatigue. So back to the physical fitness part. I know I beat that up pretty good, but for 56 years young, I'm out there carrying the banner for that. I'll work out with you kids any day. All right, let's look at the next question. How does flying the F-16 compare mentally and physically to the 7576? Great question. So the biggest thing that translates from flying fighters to flying airliners is decision making. The flying itself is very different. Here's the best analogy I can give you. Does anybody watch hockey? I never played hockey, but I enjoyed watching hockey. So flying a fighter, if I were to relate that to hockey, skating is to a hockey player what flying is to a fighter pilot. A hockey player allocates zero of his conscious effort to skating. He's practiced skating so much that he just puts his body where he needs to, whether it's forward, back, hockey stop, whatever. He doesn't think about skating at all. In a fighter, you do not think about flying at all. You're not flying an airplane, you're operating a weapon system. That weapon system has one job. That's to kill the target and survive. So kill and survive are the objectives. So you're constantly thinking, where's the threat? Where's the target? Where's my wingman? What's my weapon state? Where's the tanker? How much fuel do I have? All of that kind of stuff, your three-dimensional picture of the battle space is so overwhelming in a fighter, particularly a single-seat fighter, that you're not thinking about flying. You just put the jet where it needs to be. You're not like, I'm going to put in a little right aileron and a little rudder and coordinate this turn. You just put it there. All of your attention is on the weapon system, the target, and the threat. In the airline, you would think it's a little calmer, and most times it is, but you're thinking a little bit more about flying, but your mission is to avoid threats and get those passengers from A to B. So the translation is when a stressful thing comes up on the airline, I've joked a few times that you probably do not want to be on my flight as an airline pilot. My perfect flight, I've got one engine on fire, couple of knife yielding terrorists in the back, microbursts at the field. I mean, give me something to get excited about, because usually it's just so routine. But when something does happen at the airline and you have that experience of those high pressure decisions, you go, hey, Bob, you fly the airplane. Mary, tell me what's going on right there. What color is the smoke? Does the terrorist have a knife? What's going on? All right. Find an able-bodied passenger, have him help you with that. If I have a third pilot in there, I'm like, hey, you call the company, you figure out, what the weather looks like at our nearest divert field, and you just calmly make those decisions without your blood pressure going up at all because you've been through those high pressure decisions so you don't freak out when there's an emergency. Does that kind of make sense? All right. Got my next one here. Most challenging phase of training, UPT, SERE, airline training, and why? I'm going to touch on each of those. UPT is overwhelming. And that's kind of by design. It's changed a little bit over the years. Now they try to send pilots through some basic civilian training, which I had the benefit of that. There used to be mixed opinions. Does it make sense to go to military pilot training with flying experience? I thought it was great because on downwind, I'm not trying to remember what my base call is going to be. I'm thinking about the landing picture and the flare. Whereas the folks who haven't flown very much are trying to figure out their way around the traffic pattern. So I think that UPT going in with flying experience is a benefit. But the most challenging part of UPT was this switch from a civilian kind of relaxed training mindset to stand up. So every day at stand up, they put a slide up and they go, for me, it was a T-37 for anybody who goes now to be a T-6. They say, all right, you're at 100 feet, you get a firelight. This is the weather. Lieutenant Anderson, you have the aircraft. You come to attention, go, sir, I would maintain aircraft control, fly the airplane, and analyze the situation, take the proper action. The procedures would be, and like you have to spit out the memory items and then handle it. And if you mess any of that up, they take your name from the scheduleless magnet and they yank it off the schedule that day, and you get sat down and go to remedial training. And the idea is to put you in that high pressure situation, right? It's this idea of like, shit, I'm in front of all my instructors, all my students. I'm standing at attention. I've got to recite my memory items and I've got to handle the following questions so that someday when that shit actually happens, I can keep my cool and make it happen. That was stressful. I did bust a check ride in pilot training. I was flying a low-level nav check, and I was supposed to turn to 196, and for whatever reason, I turned to 169, and 30 degrees in the hills of Texas will get you pretty far off course pretty quick. The instructor goes, hey, I got the aircraft. I go, okay, I don't know what happened. And in the debrief, obviously, I turned to a wrong heading. So that was super stressful. Dealing with that failure was interesting. Oh, let's talk about SERE now, which is survival training. That's been in the news a little bit because some airplanes have been shot down in Iran, and those pilots were pretty well trained in their evasion and resistance techniques. But SERE training, I think that's stressful because the very unique, very mean human beings that they put in those training roles make it feel really realistic. You're essentially camping for a week, then you're camping while being hunted, and then you inevitably they send you to the rendezvous point, you get captured, and then you learn in a very realistic way how to resist giving information while being gently tortured. But a lot of mind stuff goes into that. I think the biggest challenge that I had during SERE was digesting that I'm a soldier first and a pilot second, and really understanding the great sacrifice that so many people that have been captured went through without divulging any information, and whether that be the Bataan Death March, the Hanoi Hilton. I mean, you get the stories of people that survived the worst things you could ever imagine, yet they remained loyal to their country. And being able to digest that was super important. Airline training, I think the part is just you're treated like an adult there. There is no stand-up. There is nobody's babysitting you. You got to show up and just know all your shit. And there's a lot of it. Every time you go to a new airplane, you got to go back and memorize and learn the systems and learn the memory items and learn all the stuff. And so that's the hard part about airline training. That one wasn't as hard for me because I think I was well prepared with my military training. What did I learn from my check ride failure? How did I recover? Still learning this. I learned to be humble. I kind of thought I had this shit down. I was doing pretty well at pilot training. I still ended up graduating where I wanted to, but I was like, hey, man, you're going to make mistakes every flight. You're never going to have a perfect flight. So prepare your rear end off. But when those mistakes happen, be humble and just be like, yep, I own that mistake, and kind of get back in the books and study and recognize that it's going to happen. Almost all the airplanes you guys are going to end up flying are a crewed airplane. And in that briefing, be like, hey, look, I'm not immune from mistakes. You're not going to hurt my feelings. If you see me doing something that looks creative, I probably didn't reinvent a new way to fly the sub 576. Go, hey man, what are you doing? And that way we'll trap those mistakes early. So I think the big thing I learned, number one, is mistakes are going to happen. Number two, particularly in a crewed airplane or even in a fighter, rely on your wingman a little bit. Be really humble and say, hey, look, we're going to mess some things up today. How are we going to back each other up so we can catch those little things before they become big things? Really good question. What has been the most meaningful? I'll give you a couple. My first opportunity to fly in combat was really humbling for me. That was in February of 2003 on the second night of Iraqi freedom. And it was a very complex mission, and it was the first time I'd ever been shot at. It was the first time weapons had ever come off my airplane and eliminated enemy forces. And I remember when I landed, it was the first time I ever got on the ground on my hands and knees and just was number one grateful that I was alive. But I was also super grateful for the people that had trained me and influenced my aviation career. The fighter pilots that were my heroes won the Cold War. In the Cold War between Vietnam and the Middle East, they outprepared the Russians and they took it really seriously. But they never flew a single combat sortie. It would be an NFL player and you never played a single game. Just practice, 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 practice. And they did it with such discipline and such readiness that they won. As you study military history, the Cold War was a big deal to outprepare the Russians, and in a time where the entire world was at kind of nuclear risk was a super big deal. So to have the privilege to have flown a combat mission was super rewarding for me. At the airline, getting to fly my parents. My dad is deceased now, but he worked extremely hard, 2 jobs, all that kind of stuff to help me pay for my first little bits of pilot training, and to be able to fly my parents across the ocean to an international layover and have them experience that with me was super rewarding. And then later in life, my son has decided to pursue aviation in his mid-20s, so kind of as a second career. Flying with him and being able to experience that with him has been fun, and watch him get an airline job. My daughter soloed in a little airplane we have at age 16, and being able to see her do that and the excitement she has. She has her private pilot's license. She doesn't fly for a living, but she can take friends up and that's fun. But probably out of all those, I have one more. My son, before he did the airline thing, was in the military and became an F-16 crew chief and was my crew chief. So going to the jet, getting strapped in by my kid and having him salute me as I taxied out is obviously a super proud moment. So aviation is one of those things where nobody in my family flew before me, but it's something you inevitably involve your family with. And so those have been some memorable moments. Chad, thanks for giving me the opportunity. And as you guys have follow-up questions, shoot them out to me and I'll respond in an email. Also, anybody individually can reach out to me and I'll always get back to them and answer their questions. So appreciate it, guys.